Hello friends, Jove here. Welcome to another episode of the test-driven development screencast. As usually, we are continuing where we left off in the previous episode, and in this episode we're gonna have more fun than usual because in this episode we have to deal with elements of randomness that we have to be able to test. So they have to be available in the test, like in a way we have to be able to control those elements of randomness in the tests in order to be able to drive the tests. So without further ado, let's see how that's gonna go. So here is the code where we left off in the previous episode. So let's see. First, I would run the tests to make sure that we are green and clean and that we have nothing left. And then let's see what we got. So basically here in the create post function, we have here an if condition that based on the if condition, what differs is the ID of the post. So based on the if, we have like different post ID, and also based on the if, we have different timestamp. And those two elements are elements of randomness, and we have to be able to control those in the tests in order to write our tests. So that's what we are going to be focusing on in this episode. And another aspect that I want to mention quickly here is that the algorithm, how the posts are being created, is like no rocket science. So like we can continue adding else if here. So this is basically how the posts are gonna be created. So the only thing that matters here is the post text that comes from elsewhere. And then we have to be able to generate this post ID and the timestamp ourselves, but also we have to be able to control those for the tests. Once we have the backend ready, as I mentioned in the previous episode, those like the post ID and the timestamps are gonna be created on the backend at the moment of creating the post, which is gonna be the same in the application as it will be running in memory. But for now, that's what I'm thinking right now, that like these two should be some sort of, we have to be able to put them behind an interface and then have implementations that are gonna have like let's say generating UUID for the when the application is in runtime, and for the test something that we can control. So I would start first with a let's say with a timestamp. So basically I can pull out the timestamp. I can reuse this if, and I can say 2L else 1L, and I'll assign this to a variable that I'm gonna name timestamp. So let's run, make sure I didn't break anything, which I shouldn't because this timestamp is unused. So basically, as we can see here, we use this if condition and we want to pull out this 1L or 2L in something that we will be able to control. So for example, we can create a class here, and I'll name this controllable clock. And inside here, I'm gonna expose a function that I'll call now, and it will return long. And now I have to return a timestamp, and this timestamp is gonna be a, let's say 0L. Oops. So I'm assigning 0L here as a default so that the timestamp, this val here, will have a type. And now I can pull that out into the constructor of the controllable clock. And I can make it, I think this warning here says that it should be private. So that's my little class. So now I have a controllable clock, which API is like having just one function that is now, and it returns long. So it is returning a timestamp. But for the controllable, that's why we call it controllable, we can pass the timestamp that we wish to be returned. So that's why this is controllable. So basically this is a test double that we can reuse in the tests. We are not gonna use this thing in the production code, only in the tests. But for now, we just have to make use of this in order to keep the tests passing, and then figure out how we are gonna back it up into an interface, and then have this implementation only available in the tests. So now here, what I can do, like if I run, I shouldn't break anything. Indeed, so everything is running fine. So here I'm gonna introduce braces in the if and in the else as well. And of course, the test should be still green. Those are automated refactoring, so they basically don't break things, but just in case I want to double check. So now here, what I can do controllable clock, so just make an instance and call now, and pass here what should be returned basically. So in this case 2L, and I can do the same here. So that's I think that's too much of a step. Let's back off first. So let's run, make sure that everything is still working. So now I can use this timestamp here. And that should still work. So basically now I started using my timestamp. So next, I will do what I've done before. So I'm just gonna start using the controllable clock. And that should still work. So basically, I might have done micro commits for the steps in between, but because I feel like I don't want all these intermediate steps. How am I getting to the solution? I just know the steps beforehand, and I just want to finish all of them and then make a commit. So I can basically do the same here. I'll do controllable clock 1L, and then now, oops, 1L. That should still work, and it does. And now I can get rid of these. So basically it says that even it gives a warning. So now if I run, everything should be still fine. And now I think it's a good time to make a commit. So introduced a controllable clock. So now what we can do, we want to, like, the core idea is to push this data up the call stack. So this 2L, 1L, we should be able to actually, those are things that are coming from the test, from the input. So we want to push it out from here, from this. We should only have like the abstractions here in this in the post, in the create post, basically in the view model in general in this class. So the first step is like we have to push this outside from here, this class. And of course, I mentioned that this should be available only in the tests, but initially, because it is a class, we'll have to extract an interface out of it. So the interface will be part of the production code, and this implementation only in the tests. But for now, I think I just want to first push it out so I can move it towards the tests, only then expose interface, like extract interface. So let's move it first outside in an upper level, as it says. And here I'm just gonna put it into the infrastructure package. And let's do the refactoring. And yeah, for now it's gonna be in the main, as I said. Do the refactoring. So we moved it out. And if I go back here, what I can do is I can now, for this thing, I can introduce a constructor argument for the create view model. So for the create post view model. So I can move it to the constructor. I'm gonna call this a clock. And of course, in the tests, I have to import it myself. So here should be 1L, here should be 2L. And if I run, everything should be still working. So also I think here we should use the clock. Let's run. So it works. And next what I can do is I can hard code here true, so that only this condition is gonna be executed, only inside the if, the else is not gonna be. And so now if I just go over here, it's gonna say simplify expression, and it's just gonna call the clock now, and everything should be working fine. That's nice. So now let's make a little commit here. So what we are gonna do is extracted the controllable clock as standalone class. And next, make this private. What I want to do is I want to make an interface out of this. Extract to separate file, of course. So the interface is gonna be named clock. It's gonna be in the infrastructure. It's gonna be in my production code. And I want to take the now function. Let's do the refactoring. So that's what I wanted. And now I want to move this class, not in this route, but I want it to be only available in the tests. Let's do the refactoring. Well, first, if I do this refactoring, I'll break the things. Why? Because here I'm taking the controllable clock instead of the clock. So let's first change this to take the clock. Make sure it still works. And it does. So let's first maybe make that commit. Extracted an interface. Extracted a clock interface. And only now move this one into the tests. So let's do the refactoring. Okay, the shortcut doesn't work. So let's run again, make sure it works. Okay, the import here is not, I did not delete the import before. And now it works. So now let's see what happened. Basically here, yeah, this should have been, yeah, I did not remove the import, my mistake in the previous commit. So basically what I can do is I can amend the previous commit to add this import thingy. So my previous commit is gonna have the import removed as well here. So as we can see here, the clock and the controllable clock imports are changed. And next, so here what just happened is that I have moved the controllable clock to be to live in the tests package, not in the production code. So moved the controllable clock to be available only inside the tests, only for the tests. And now everything should be fine. Yes. So now we can proceed. We can do basically the same for the ID. So again, let's do this. So first I'll take the post ID of the second one, otherwise the first one, and assign this into a variable, and I'll call this post ID. So that's my post ID. It should not break anything. And now I think I can replace here the post with a post ID, and here as well. And basically now here I can replace this with true. It should work. And I can simplify the expression so we have just one line to create a post. And now what's left is to push this post to post ID 2 and post ID, and it's like this thingy up the call stack, so we won't have any data here. So we can do the similar thing. We can create a class. So I'll call this Controllable Id Generator, and it's gonna have a function next that will return a string. And it's gonna return ID. So the ID is gonna be, let's say, empty string for now. So I'll create a I'll introduce parameter into the constructor of this class, and I'll name that, yeah, I'll leave it ID. That's fine. So now this thing can be private, and by now nothing should be changed. Everything should be the same. So everything works. And similarly, we can introduce now the braces here and here. That should be of no consequence. And we can do the same with Controllable Id Generator next. And the same for this thing here. Controllable Id Generator of this thing next. And that should still work. And now I can get rid of these two. That should still work. Nice. So now let's make a little commit. Introduced a controllable ID generator. Now let's do the same. Move first this one up. I'm gonna move in the infrastructure as well. Let's do this refactoring. I need it in the main for now. So here, what I can do is I can introduce a again a parameter to the constructor of the view model, and I'll name this ID generator. And of course here I'll have to, in the tests, I'll have to import it. But of course here we need only post ID. Everything should be still working. And it is. So now here I'll just make this private. And I will replace this with ID generator. And that should still work. And again, do the true here. And simplify. And now everything should be fine. So now we simplified the things, and we no longer have any data here in the create post. But of course, we want to be able to, like, the controllable ID generator similarly should be only part of the tests. So let's get to the controllable ID generator, and now extract interface out of this into a separate file. We are gonna name this just ID generator. That's gonna be in the production code, and we need the next function. Let's do this refactoring. Now if we go back to our ID generator into the view model, instead of the controllable ID generator, let's take only the ID generator, import it, and delete the previous import. Now everything should be still working. And of course, let's check this in. Extracted an interface for the ID generator. And finally, we can go ahead and move this class to live in the tests only. And that should still work. Now, one question that comes to mind: will this class be available also for the UI tests? So we can basically have a shared folder in the tests that we can share between the UI and the unit tests, or like what I call micro tests. There will be just a little very simple configuration in the build Gradle that will be that will define what's the source of the that will add additional source into the UI tests and the unit tests. That will be a shared folder, let's say, shared package. And we can put those test doubles there, or we can just rewrite them if you want different configuration. It just it's up to our flexibility. Like we are flexible to do whatever we want. But if it's something that we can reuse, like we can surely reuse. So now what happened is, yeah, here moved the controllable ID generator to be available only for tests. Now what's interesting is that now we have this interface. For now, because we are using only an implementation in the tests, we don't have anything else. But for example, later on, as we are gonna be developing the app, probably the posts the IDs that we will need to be generated for the purpose of the app, they should be, let's say, UUID. We can write a test, for example. We can write an implementation of this ID generator that will be generating UUIDs. But the problem is that we cannot test according to the exact values, because again, these are elements of randomness. But what we can do, we can introduce, let's say, a regec text that will check if the ID that is being generated complies to this the structure of UUID, for example. So that's something we can play later on. For now, we don't have a need to have such an ID generator that's gonna be, let's say, UUID generator. We don't have a need, so we don't write any implementation. When we will have a need, we'll write that implementation. So just I don't want to do anything like that is not necessary. Like before I have approved that I need something, I don't want to do anything. So as the last thing that we can do is for this episode is if we take a look now here in the create post view model, what we ended up with is very simple method that just picks up the data from the instances that are being injected in the constructor. It creates a post and it sets it into the as a value in the mutable post state in the live data. So basically I can also separate this into another method. I can name this create new post. Let's say it's gonna be a private method, private function. So now here the responsibility of this public interface is to take the text. It's gonna ask somebody to create a post, like just create a post for me with this text. I don't care how you're gonna do that. And this private function is just creating, like gathering all the data that is required to create a post, and it creates a post and it returns the post. So basically we are now more flexible to introduce like different things here. Let's say what happens when an error, like in case of an error, like when we are not able to create a post and those kind of things. But probably we are gonna talk about those in the next episode, like errors and handling errors and that kind of things. For now I think this is good enough. So let's check this one in. Extracted a function for creating the posts. I think here we can also in the tests, because the test should be also clean. It's not very clear with this user data what's the relation, like for example here we have the post text and actual post. We have the post ID, we have the user ID, and here we have controllable, like when we take a look at the data of the post, like 1L, we can see that it comes from the controllable clock as a 1L, so the same value. Also for the ID generator, like we see controllable ID generator where the post ID comes from, and we have that ID in the post. However, the user ID is not very clear here, so we have to take a look like where does it come from. So I think if I inline the user ID and the user data in the tests, it's gonna make it even more clear. So let's see how that's gonna look just quickly. Yeah, so I think now it looks a bit cleaner, like what's the relation between the data. Because all that data is relevant in this case, in this situation. So we have the post text that we are passing in the public interface that is available from the view model, and then what's the relation between the post that is being created and all these values. So I think it makes the tests, like the intent of the tests, more clear. So now let's make sure we didn't break things, first of all. Of course, like I also want to mention that we have this smell here, that the in-memory user data. We don't have an implementation yet, so like I mean, I did not introduce interface for it yet, but probably this is gonna go behind an interface as well, so that we can have an implementation for the that's gonna store the user ID for the signed up user into some sort of, let's say, file or like preferences or data store. We'll investigate what I want to do in some of the next episodes, but for now this in-memory user data does the job. So That's why I didn't come up with an interface yet, but as a smell here, because we are mixing abstraction levels, this is concrete class, these are interfaces, we can use this smell here to actually tell us that we have to do additional refactoring in this class, in this constructor basically. But yeah, I think that would be, let's make sure we are clean. I just want to also commit this. Better, well, cleaner, or I'll just say improved the intention of the tests, of the post creation tests. So that's about it. I think we are pretty much done for this episode. I think it was fun episode because we were dealing with elements of randomness. We learned some new techniques, how we can actually deal with it, how to work with this, how to approach this situation. And this episode was full of refactoring, of course, like small steps, always baby steps. Try different things to come up with a final solution. I think it was interesting. So also we are already about 30 minutes in, so I think that's gonna be a wrap up. Thank you so much for the time and the attention. I'm gonna catch you in the next episode. Cheers.